welcome to the latest episode of The Jump Show. It's episode 2 of the Ante-Post Cheltenham Festival series. And after our first week of putting up some fairly rogue selections, I'm sure this week is going to be the same again. Jake Price and Dan Over alongside once more. How are you, boys? Jake, start with you. How's it going? Fulham doing all right last week, which was good to see.
Yeah, really good. And just bought my DRF flight as well. So all ready for Dublin in a couple of weeks' time, which I am absolutely buzzing for. And finally, after all these years of saying I'm going to go, I'm actually going to go there. So yeah, looking forward to that.
And there's going to be a great swathe of juvenile delinquents on their way over to Ireland for that weekend, Dan.
Yeah, it sounds like things are going to get slightly out of control, to be honest. But I mean, that's what we go for, right? But it's going to, like Jake, I've wanted to go for ages, haven't gone. And yeah, this is the year it finally happens. And it's a nice little taster. Well, actually, it's arguably better than Cheltenham in terms of race quality. But it's going to be a sign of things to come, I'd say.
Well, at least the Irish race their horses, don't they? Unlike some of our trainers, eh?
Who could you be referring to?
Well, I wouldn't dream of saying. Please remember, if you enjoy this video, which hopefully you will, to like and subscribe. We'd love to get 150 likes or thereabouts, and 1,500 subscribers would be absolutely delectable. So please do hit that button. Right, we had some pretty miserable, mediocre, in fact, it was less than mediocre racing last weekend. In fact, it was utterly deplorable. Possibly the worst weekend of racing I can remember in recent history. So we won't be dwelling on that. What we will do, though, is answer some of your questions that you posed to us. And we're going to start with David Alveoli, who left this question on YouTube. Does the upcoming Cheltenham Festival feel like one of the most open festivals in a while? I'm finding it hard to predict some races. Jake, I think you might be fielding this one.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with him, to be honest. If we go through the short price ones, you've got Marine Nationale in the Arkle, you've got Constitution Hill, obviously, in the Champion Hurdle, El Fabiolo Champion Chase, Gaelic Warrior, and Galloping des Champs. They're the only 5 real solid, short price favourites that we can all see right now. Other than that, it is very open across the board. Lots of these graded races. I'm going to talk about the Albert Bar later. That's 12-1 the field. There's loads of races where they are just wide open, and I think it has come down to a lot of the novice hurdle division, especially, has been open. There's been no real standout performances. Obviously, we've had Ballyburn and Firefox. They're probably the main 2 that stand out. And when we get that rearranged Lawlers and Nace on Friday, hopefully we'll get another standout performance there. But I think it has been very open, especially in the novice hurdles. Novice chases hasn't been sewn up, other than got Marine and Gaelic. The Fremont division looks really open. So does the National Hunt Chase. And I think another aspect to it as well that's actually been bugging me recently is that the handicaps aren't priced up across the board either. So it's kind of hard to get a real gauge on your handicaps at this stage, get some in the short list, and just have your complete book ready to go and have a good look through all of it. So yeah, I would say it is very open. But as such, we are getting some decent prices. So fingers crossed that we can get some in our books as well and put them up for you guys.
Yeah, it does seem weird, doesn't it, the handicaps are being priced up so late. I kind of wonder, is it a post-Christmas can't-be-bothered-itis from some of the big firms? They're just thinking, we've had too many mince pies in Turkey. Let's just leave it another week. A bit like my new fitness regime.
I think it's probably more towards the liability side of things in terms of, getting these horses that put up at 20s and 25 first show. That's just not happening anymore. Most of them are going in at 16-1. That's pretty much a standard price for any horse that's been priced up. So yeah, it is a shame, and it's annoying that we're at this stage and we don't have all the races priced up. But hopefully towards the end of January we'll have everything and we can get cracking with it.
Didn't you say earlier today, Jake, you asked Sky about the handicaps? They said they're not going to do it to the end of the month. Is that right?
Yeah, they said something. Sky Bet said towards the end of the month. Betfair didn't get back to me, so make of that what you will.
Pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. Where am I? I'm chasing around bookies trying to get Rogue Kim Muir horses priced up. This is a desperate state of affairs we're in right now.
That's part of the whole fun of the fair, isn't it? Getting these early prices and handicaps as well.
Yeah.
And
sort it out. We've got a question here from James Stock on Twitter. Thanks, James, for this. He says, "What are your thoughts in general about headgear in handicaps?" And we might as well go to the man wearing headgear right now. That is Dan Overall with his thoughts on this question.
Not enough headgear in the world to make me genuine, but I think When I was first kind of getting into Cheltenham in particular, I think a lot of people would probably be in the same boat to me that Paul Ferguson's Cheltenham guide was like the Bible. And in the early years, I think it was hammered home a lot. First time headgear, handicaps was always a massive positive. So I wanted to dig into it a bit deeper and actually see if that still rings true or if it's just maybe a bit of an outdated trope that isn't necessarily true. So my question to you two is, what strike rate do you think is high? Do you think it's higher in handicap hurdles or handicap chases for first time headgear?
Chasers.
I'll go hurdles.
It's chases, but only just. And we'll get into the details soon. So all of these stats are from Horse Race Base since 2003. But to be honest, they don't paint first time headgear in a great light. I thought it was going to be better than this. So handicap hurdlers, 191 runners in the last 20 years wearing first time headgear, 8 winners, 17% have placed. Jazzy Matty last year was the only winner. God almighty, why do I have to keep reminding myself of that travesty? And then before that, it was Cider Burley in back-to-back years. I had different headgear fitted on both occasions. And then you went back to Diego de Charmil, but not really a great list. They're pretty hit and miss. And if you backed every single one at Betfair SP, you would have lost 20% of your stake as well. So not great. I thought, like you, Jake, chases were going to be a lot better. I thought it was going to be fairly significant because generally getting older horses who may need a bit of a freshen up, it just all makes sense. But, I mean, fairing up, so the strike rate for handicap hurdles is 4.2%. The strike rate for handicap chasers, 4.3%. So it was marginal.
Wow.
7 winners from 162 runners. The place rate is better, 22% place rate. But if you backed all of them to Betfair SP, you would have lost 23% of your money. Vintage Clouds was the last winner in 2021. And their record last year was P0, PPP90, PP. And before Vintage Cloud, just go back to 2016 for your first time headgear handicap chase winner. And what I think's happened is there was a period between 2012 and 2016. Again, like me, a lot of people would have been getting into the Cheltenham big at that kind of year. In that period, there are 6 winners, and you would have doubled your money to Betfair SP, backing them all. So there was that little golden period where you had first time headgear winners, which I think almost set a precedent which hasn't been sustained. So we all still look for first time headgear. I think it's an angle we all still play on, but maybe it's time we put that to bed, and maybe it's just getting to the stage where it's overbet.
I mean, I think that's answered the question and more, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I do things to overkill,
research.
as you know.
Fantastic research. Great stuff. Well, I hope, James Stock, you are satisfied with that fantastic answer from Dan. We've got another one here from David Alveoli on YouTube, who says, with the Dublin Racing Festival upcoming, what trial are you most looking forward to for Cheltenham pointers? I think this is a really good question, actually. I mean, obviously you can name any number of races, really, but I suppose in terms of making the Cheltenham picture a little bit clearer, I'd say the Nathaniel Lacey is probably the one I'm looking forward to seeing most, because the Albert Bartlett picture at the moment is pretty hazy. We don't really know, A, who is kind of top of the pile of the Irish, and we don't really know who is going to be going over that 3-mile trip. We can, hazard a few guesses, but at the moment it's a pretty hazy picture. Now, the big one we're looking forward to seeing, I think, if he does come back, and you two might be able to illuminate me a little more on this, is High Class Hero, who we haven't really seen for quite a while. And there were rumorings going around that he may be injured, but I think he is targeted for this Nathaniel Lacey, and we'll be able to see what he can do, because at the moment he's the Ante-Post favourite for the Albert Bartlett. Obviously, we saw Johnny Who in the Challow. That was a pretty good Albert Bartlett trial, really, wasn't it? Sticking on in that atrocious ground and wasn't beaten too far up the line. So at the moment, he'd be the biggest British challenger. But I think that race in Ireland will hopefully open up a few doors in terms of what we can expect from the race. And usually the Irish have the strongest hand in that contest. So I think that will tell us a lot more. The other one I wanted to mention was the Spring Juvenile, because that is a race I'm looking forward to from my own personal point of view, seeing Mighty Bandit coming back and taking on some of the horses that beat him last time, after he had that excuse, of course, with likely Carlo Conti and horses like that reopposing. So looking forward to seeing that one. And the other one looking forward to seeing is the Irish Gold Cup with Fast or Slow, because that's going to be a big challenge, I think, for him, coming back off a little bit of a break. But also we hope to see a really nice performance from him, so that we go into Cheltenham and the clash between him and Galopin Des Champs is very much on. So that would be my thoughts on the DRF. Dan, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on the Nathaniel Lacey picture at all?
No, I think it's a good point. Obviously, it does tend to point towards more Albert Bartlett types. I'm not actually sure about High Class Hero. I'd assume He'd want to run before going to the Albert Bartlett. That seems a logical place. I wouldn't really assume he'd go to something like the Michael Purcell. I think that the DRF would be the more logical stepping stone, knowing Willie Mullins' MO. I'm actually quite looking forward to the 2-mile novice hurdle, to be honest. I mean, obviously, I mentioned no flies on him last week. I hope he goes there, but that's still a very muddy picture. Obviously, It's For Me seems to have disappeared. He's not going to the Moscow Flyer. He's not even entered. So whether he can make it back for that, there's no real breaking news on him. But the 2-mile division needs shaking up, and that's probably going to be a race to do it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one too. I mean, it's a feast of racing, isn't that?
It is, yeah. It's such a good 2 days.
And Jake, anything you're looking forward to particularly?
Yeah, I'd agree on that 2-mile novice hurdle, because I think we've got a few horses now that have got a few problems as to where they're going to go in terms of trip. Slade Steel being one of them, Ballyburn being the other. I think both of them are probably going to go to the DRF. Both of them are going to have the option of 2-mile or 2-mile 6, and right now they're both short enough for the Ballymore, which is obviously slap bang in the middle of those two. So it's going to be very interesting to see where those two end up going, and if they all do end up going in the 2-mile race, it could be a very, very hot renewal.
Yeah, definitely agree with all that. Let's get the next question in, shall we? This is from Bob Hardinger on YouTube. I thought that originally said Bob Ollinger, but it doesn't. It says Bob Hardinger. Thanks for this, Bob. He says, could we get a horse from each of you that is running this weekend, which you were thinking about in regards to the Cheltenham Festival? That's a really good question, actually. And Dan, I know you've got a couple you're looking forward to seeing.
Yeah, as always, you ask for one, I'll give you 3. One, I had to mention, because if he runs, my heart's going to be in my mouth again. It only seems like yesterday I was having heart palpitations about watching him, but Broadway Boy is in at Warwick in the Hampton over 3 miles, looking like a decent race. Yeah, I think obviously it's not going to be easy conceding weights all round, but yeah, I'm hoping for that. Maybe one who may run against him is probably more interesting with view to handicaps is the Changing Man, who still looks very well handicapped on his earlier second, splitting Stay Away Faye and Grey Dawning. He needs one more run before he's eligible for something like the Ultima. And then maybe one who is still the talking horse for the Ultima, or has been for a while, is Chianti Classico. He's entered at Kempton. I would not be too put off if he's beaten at Kempton the weekend, because Kim Bailey's horses are not in any good form whatsoever. It was maybe a similar case actually a couple of years ago where was it Imperial Aura went into Cheltenham up, having the yard went for a really barren spell. He still ran okay, though he slightly overlooked and still managed to win come the day that he managed to turn it around. So keep an eye on Chianti Classico if he runs. If he puts in maybe a slightly disappointing performance, I wouldn't be too harsh on him, and that'll be his 3rd run. So again, he'll be eligible for the Big Spring handicaps as well.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing all those, particularly that Hampton Novices Chase, which I'll come on to in a few minutes' time for myself, actually, as well. I've gotten interested in that myself. Jake, what about you this weekend?
Yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to seeing Banbridge back. Obviously, it's been a long old autumn if you're a fan of him, waiting for him to come back. We're finally going to see him at Kempton in the Sylvian Arcot Conti Chase. And luckily enough for him, the ground is coming up absolutely perfect by the looks of it. There was significant improvement from yesterday into today, and there's now good in the home straight. There's quite a lot of good to soft around as well. There's no rain forecast for the rest of the week, so it's probably going to be good to soft in places at the very worst for him, which is absolutely ideal, because obviously he is a horse who prefers that better ground, and that's what they've been waiting for with him. Look, he's going to have a really good chance here. Obviously, he's got to make it the step up in grade from novice company to open company. That'll be the test here. But he's got his Ryanair entry, and I think that his current price of 14-1 is obviously going to absolutely collapse if he goes and wins that. Edward Stone's in the race, who is a similar type of horse in the fact that they're both trying the Ryanair for the first time. Obviously, Edward Stone has a lot more experience and a lot older, but yeah, I really like Banbridge. He was close to being a selection this week, but I think the problem I had with him was that with the fact of needing good ground, Connection could easily just sack off the Ryanair if it comes up like soft or heavy on the day and just wait for entry, which obviously is a massive negative for if you're having an Ante-Post bet on him. I think if you're a big fan of the horse, then 14-1 is probably worth having a few quid on, especially if you think he's going to win this weekend like I do. But yeah, Banbridge, I'm looking forward to seeing him, and hopefully he can announce himself as a Ryanair horse.
I think he might well do. Yeah, hopefully he could retain all that ability he's shown us in the past. It'd be good to see, wouldn't it? Yeah, fingers crossed. I'm looking forward to seeing Brave Kingdom this weekend in the Hampton. Paul Nicholls nominated this as the option back in December when he was a winner, and he's a horse who I think just stays and stays and stays. I mean, Paul Nicholls described him as a big old galloper. I've always thought he's the type that might be a National Hunt Chase type, to be honest, in the back of my mind, because he's a proper stay. I don't think he's got the gears for a Brown Advisory, but he does, as I say, keep on pounding away at the turf. The only weird thing about this is that I can't find a price from anywhere in that race, so I'm not entirely sure what the plan is in terms of Cheltenham or not. But I mean, he's a proper hardcore galloper, so I think it would be the perfect race for him. I don't know if either of you got a view on Brave Kingdom at all. Obviously, he had that really long time off the track, but since he's come back, he's looked pretty good. I mean, Jake, have you got an opinion on him at all?
No, I think I agree with you in terms. I think he looks a proper galloper. The way he won that last day, he really did stay on strongly at the finish. So it's interesting he's not priced up, but if you ask for a price, you might get 14-1 if you're lucky.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I think it could be the perfect race for him, and Paul Nicholls has had good success in that in the past. So yeah, we'll see.
He'll be priced up if he wins.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, big time. Very much so. Got to get in there early. I have to get a request a bit early. Finally, we got a question from Johnny C. This is on YouTube. He says, going to my first Cheltenham in March, have you any tips or advice? Now, Johnny, although Dan and Jake have been to Cheltenham many, many times in the past, I think past and prior exploits suggest that they may not be the best people to ask in terms of trying to keep a cool head. But we'll ask anyway. Go on, Dan, start with you.
Well, if talking about the race course, I'd say number one is get a spot 15 or so, 20 minutes before the race, if possible, especially for the Supreme. Otherwise, you'll end up in no man's land. You won't be able to see anything. And you'll end up watching Constitution Hill on a big screen overlooking the Guinness Village like I did a couple of years ago, which is not how you want to do it. And then I think as well as that, I'd say, I think when you're out and about, just talk to people. Like if you're out in town afterwards, just get talking to people. If you're going on your own, like you'd be amazed. I think there's a lot of reputation about Cheltenham these days. Oh, it's just people going there to get drunk. It's not really about racing. But I mean, I'll always remember meeting Cam Sword, the owner of Correct Rambler, as people will know him last year, who just came up to us in the pub and started talking about us. We didn't know him from the man in the street before that, but he was by himself because all the others had gone home and he just started talking to us and we had a great night. So get involved. And also don't get suckered in by the bars in between races. You won't make it back for the next one.
That's a really good point, actually. It does take a long time to get a drink in between races. The other thing I would suggest is that I wouldn't necessarily have done it, but I did it a lot last year on the Tuesday. And I think it's partly because I was with you lads and you wanted to do it, but I was really glad I did do it. And that was after the kind of two main races on the first day, to go after the winner had come in to go and clap him in, because one of the races, of course, is Honeysuckle, so that was an amazing experience to clap her in. I know that's not a kind of story you get every year, but I still recommend doing that because it kind of gives you that nice cycle, doesn't it? At the end of the cycle, the circle of racing Cheltenham life, of getting there, looking at the horse in the parade ring, going watching the race, and then seeing them back in. So I'd suggest doing that if you can for the big races at least. Jake, what about you?
Hey, none of you joined me for Jazzy Matty in the parade ring. I was the only one there clapping him in.
I was on the floor, that's why.
2 bits of advice for me. I assume you probably already have your tickets, but if you don't, then I would recommend going to either the Tats or Club sections, because in the best mate enclosure, you don't get to see the parade ring, as Tom has just mentioned. In terms of value, it's probably Tattersalls is normally cheaper, and it's normally just as good as Club, realistically. So if you're looking to save a few quid, then go for Tats. But yeah, they're the enclosures to aim for. And then, yeah, like Dan said, if you can get into town afterwards, then try and find a nice pub. Obviously, we always go down to the Feathered Fish. We're giving them more free promo here. I think they need to give us a brand deal at this point, us and LTR. But the Feathered Fish is normally our drinking spot. So yeah, come down and chat to us if you're around.
Let's move on, shall we, to the second Ante-Post bet from each of us for this year's Cheltenham Festival. Drum roll, please. We're going to go to Dan first for yours. Looking forward to hearing about this one.
Yeah, this was a bit of blow to me this morning because I was all ready to go for my first handicapper. I was willing to go off the edge of the cliff with a horse called Batman Girac, who was in the Fred Winter. He was 16-1 last night. Just checked this morning just to check it's all the same, and he's a sea of blue for some unknown reason. I think Jay mentions he's entered at the weekend. I don't think that's reason to cut a horse by 5 points from 16s into 11s, but breaking news, horse is alive and well after running 3 weeks ago is not exactly grounds for such a massive cut, but I can't justify putting up a handicapper at 11-1 at this stage in a race like the Fred Winter. As much as I like the horse, I can't do it. So I had to look up further afield, and it began to be a bit of a struggle, but I fell back on one who I had my eye on a bit of last week. And it comes in a National Hunt Chase. And I think looking at the market, it's still pretty wide open. Obviously, Willie has a few in there. See, Embassy Gardens heads the market, still not fully convinced by him. A bit like Grange Clare West. I know he managed to back it up, but Embassy Gardens never has. Didn't really achieve all that much in his one novice chase so far. Grange Clare West is up there. He won't run. Meeting of the Waters, I have no idea. He might run, but maybe Grand National long-term aim. Nick Rocket needs to qualify, probably runs. Then after that, I think you've got a whole host of horses who won't run. I think Broadway Boy, Monty Star, Stay Away Faye will all go to the Brown Advisory. Fat the File is Turners or Browns. Corbett's Cross has been back today for some unknown reason, but I can't imagine why. I would never have him in here in a million years. And all of those are shorter or the same price as my selection, which is maybe the forgotten horse, and that's Salvador Ziggy. Now we go back to the summertime, early wintertime. He was one of the early Ante-Post plunges. So he made his chase debut in June, beating Habrisco, racked up a trio of wins in pretty modest affairs, to be honest, but looked decent in doing so. And he was a short of 6-1 for this race a while back, which was on the short side, but now he's drifted out to 16-1. I think you can make a fair case for that being overpriced. Now we have a bit more evidence to work with. Obviously, then went to the Kerry National, which I think is his standout bit of form. Ran off a mark 150 that day. He was a favourite. I think he ran really, really well that day in second, giving over a stone to the progressive Desert Moor House. There was absolutely no disgrace in that whatsoever. First going a handicap off top weight. That was a fine effort. And he went up £3 after that for a mark of 153 in Ireland. Now, you look back at the previous winners of the National Hunt Chase. Obviously, we had Gardo Manil last year was rated 155 going into the race. You take the average of the previous 10 winners, the average rating is 148. So the handicapper in his mind, Salvador Ziggy's already achieved a level of form that would be good enough to win this race. Obviously, the British handicap will probably, if he was running a handicap, would give him a 2 or so extra pounds. So he's a real at the high end of a kind of winner. And I appreciate that he's done it via the handicap route to a certain extent, which isn't the same as graded form. But either way, he's still achieved a fairly high level to be a 16-1 shot for a race like this. This is the only race that really makes sense for him as well. Like, he's not going to run in an Ultima off top weight. He can't run in the Kim Muir. This has always kind of been the long-term plan. And I think there's been a massive overreaction to him losing the American Grand National. Like, he's drifted some 6s to 16s after that defeat, and it just doesn't really make sense. Like, you can completely put a line through that. Like, going over to America after having a few races and basically being on the go since the spring, and then racing over 2 Mile 5 and having all sorts done to you because they require different treatment over there. You can't judge him on that whatsoever. It's far better to judge him on what he did previously. Obviously, Gordon Elliott has a superb record in the race. I mean, the likes, we go down the list, he's always got one thereabouts. And bearing in mind, we went Chemical Energy last year. He went off 8-1 for the race, despite not achieving as much as Salvador Ziggy had. And he was also bitterly disappointing at Nace, which is far more easy to judge him on. And he still went off 8-1 on ground that was against him. I think this race will cut up a fair bit, as mentioned earlier. I do admit that he's probably vulnerable to a classier type, but I think there's probably doubts about what that will be, and I think you'd be hard-pressed to be confident about what lines up here. Whereas if all is fitting well with Salvador Ziggy, he will definitely run. He's for a trainer who knows this race extremely well. We have him bang there, bearing in mind his options of what he could possibly win are limited from his handicap mark. And he's probably the more old-school, traditional type of winner of this race. So 16-1, I think that's overpriced. And if he gets there, I don't see a world in which he's bigger than 16-1.
Yeah, well, I've always seen him as a type for that race, I have to say myself. He looks like a proper, he'd have the profile for it for sure. And I can absolutely see that too. So, yeah, Salvador Ziggy's been put up for Cheltenham before in the past by plenty of good judges. Hasn't come to fruition yet, but hopefully it will do for Dan this year. Okay, move on to Jake, your Ante-Post bet number 2.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I am going to the Albert Bartlett this week. And as you mentioned, Tom, it is an open race. But the one that I really think has a good chance here is Croke Park for Gordon Elliott. Now, he was a very expensive point-to-point recruit, having absolutely smashed the infamous Barry the Butcher, who somehow we've still never seen. But anyway, he also beat He's My Hero and Hellwine, who, we can look at that form in a much bit stronger light, having those two actually raced in under rules. And yeah, he was just a horse who took a lot of time to come to hand. Last season, he was supposed to be, one of Gordon's good bumper horses. In the end, he didn't get to run until the end of the season, where he was beaten after a very long absence. But that wasn't ever going to be his bag bumper scene. Obviously, he's a big point-to-point horse, and going over hurdles was always going to be the making of him. And obviously, he did such a thing in the autumn when he went and won his hurdles debut at Clonmel. And he actually started off over 2 miles, which I think is quite interesting, really, because when you've got a horse like this who's a 3 mile point-to-point winner, a big future chaser, you'd not often do start him at least over 2.5. So the fact they start him over 2, shows that he shows a decent amount of pace. And he won that by 11 lengths, nice and easy. He was obviously the best horse in the race, and it was a lovely performance to go with it. But what really catches the eye with him is he then stepped up in grade for the 2 mile 4 furlong Grade 3 Monksfield Novice Hurdle. Now this has been won in the past by the likes of Deaf Juicy, Sam Crow, Fury Road. So obviously you've got two Bartlett horses in there and a Ballymore horse. But as I'll go on to in a minute, I think he is definitely a Bartlett horse in the future. And in that Grade 3 race, he travelled into the race strongly. He was asked for an effort then at the second last, and he really did find gamely. It was a long run in that day, but he found gamely to beat Mel Monroe. He jumped the last with aplomb, really. He really did jump it well. Showed that he had plenty left in the tank, and he ground out a 3.25 length success over Mel Monroe. And she's been given a rating of 132 by the BHA for the Thames qualifier at Warwick this weekend. And obviously Croke Park was giving her £7. So you're talking about around a 140 performance there from him already, which is obviously a very good start, heading into the spring. And another, piece of form from that race that's working out well is Search for Glory was back in third. Now he was beaten 5.25 lengths by Croke Park that day. And he ran in the Grade 2 over Christmas, over 3 miles at Limerick. And that day he was only beaten 2 lengths by Loch Lynn, who's, as short as 14-1 in places for the Bartlett. And he also beat Stella Story as well. It was close up to Stella Story, close up to both of these. He didn't beat them, obviously, but only beaten 2 lengths by those two, whereas he was beaten 5 lengths by Croke Park. I think that puts Croke Park's form, ahead of them. And, Gordon said after the race that he's going to enjoy stepping up to 3 miles eventually. So there's plenty to like about him. He was obviously supposed to run on Sunday at Naas in the Lauders at Naas, but that race was obviously postponed till Friday. I assume that he'll just go again on Friday. And look, I don't think he's going to beat Firefox. Firefox is obviously the stable number 1, the horse that beat Ballyburn. So that form looks way ahead of what Croke Park has achieved, especially over the 2.5 mile trip. But I think that it's not going to take much for Croke Park to shorten for the Bartlett this weekend. I think all he has to do is stay on a finishing 2nd, 3rd, or 4th. And he really will end up being smashed for this Bartlett, because it's as we said, it's a wide open market. It's crying out for someone to take it by the scruff of the neck. And I think it could be him. And the fact that I don't even need him to win the race that he's going for on Friday to do such a thing, I think that puts a lot in your favour when you're looking at an Ante-Post bet. So yeah, as I said, plenty more to come. I'd imagine because the race has been delayed a week as well, that it's basically going to mean he's going to have to go to the festival fresh now, which I quite like as an angle, because you mentioned the Nathaniel Lacey earlier, Tom, and that could end up being a decent race. It could end up being a hard race before Cheltenham. And over 2 mile 6, it could end up being, a hard race over a trip that makes him, doesn't paint him in his best light. So I think that if he did go here, finish a good 2nd and 3rd on Friday, then go to the Bartlett, as obviously the ill-fated Ginto did not so long ago, I think that would be absolutely ideal for him. And yeah, I think 16-1 is just a really nice price about him. I think he's a lovely horse to take going forward. He's going to be a chaser, of course, but I think that he's got enough speed to win a Bartlett. He's obviously got the stamina to win a Bartlett. And yeah, I'm really hoping that he can just run well on Friday and keep this bet alive.
Yeah, he's a proper plodder, but he's got class. Like he's got the class I think you need to make your mark over hurdles at Grade 1 level. And I agree with you. I think he'll make a serious staying chaser in time. But yeah, that muddy picture of the Albert Bartlett, he could easily make it a little less muddy, couldn't he?
Yeah.
Fingers crossed for you, Jake. Yeah, hopefully that one goes well. I'm going to go to the Gold Cup for my Ante-Post selection. I put this on the WhatsApp group a little bit earlier on, and I could sense through the ether both Jake and Dan laughing themselves silly as I put down the words Korak Rambler. And we all know this horse very well, of course. Last year's Grand National winner and a very impressive Ultima winner for the 2nd year on the banks. And my main reasoning behind this is there have been plenty of horses in the past who are spring horses. It is a well-known theory that there are a series of equine athletes who do not perform to their level they should pre-Christmas, and then come the spring, they are different horses. The one that really springs to my mind is Champagne Fever, if I had to nominate one, mainly because you saw him at Cheltenham, and he was at Cheltenham Festival, that is, and he was always a different horse at that time of year, February, March, April time. Corach Rambler, I think, is pretty much proven that he is the same thing. And my theory was bolstered this week because Peter Scudamore came out and said that he's a completely different horse over the last couple of weeks. He has changed in his coat. He looks happier. And that is exactly what I wanted to hear. Because if you look at the plain facts and figures of last year's Ultima victory, where he beat Fast or Slow, who of course is now one of the main Gold Cup protagonists, he did it in sensational fashion once again. There's something about Cheltenham that really agrees with him. He stays on up that hill like nothing else. The extra 2.5 furlongs, of course, will be no problem because we saw him win the Grand National, which of course is a lot further. And he's a pro. I mean, if you watched that Ultima last year, I was stood at alongside you guys, I think, for the Ultima last year, and you'd have been hard pressed not to say next season he'll run a race in a Gold Cup. He might not win it, but he'll definitely be bang there or thereabouts, you'd think, if he doesn't fall. Now, the big question is, can he get the breaks? Because he's a bit of a luck ride, isn't he? He needs a bit of luck in the saddle. But Derek Fox gets on with him so well, and he rode an absolute peach on Corach Rambler last year. So much of my reasoning really depends on the fact that he's going to come back a better horse this spring. You wouldn't be hugely encouraged with the 2 runs he's shown so far this season. I did think he showed a little bit more last time out, but it wasn't a huge amount. But that said, I think you can scrap all that and just look at the spring as a horse who's going to come back to the Grand National and probably run a big race there, but hopefully take the Gold Cup on the way too. You're taking a bit on trust. The Gold Cup picture at the moment is very strong. With Galopin Des Champs had in the market, he was extremely impressive. We all know that in Ireland. But Corach Rambler's 25-1. He's won the last 2 Ultima Handicap chases, both in spectacularly impressive fashion. And I'm willing to take the chance that he's going to be back to his best come Cheltenham in March. And if he is, he should not be a 25-1 shot. It's as simple as that. He'll have absolutely the class to lie up with some of the best in that race. I don't think he's probably quite as good as Galopin Des Champs on a proper going day, but there's no guarantee that he will be. And he doesn't always produce it. We saw him produce it at Leopardstown last time, but I'd say, in the John Durkan, he wasn't the same horse. No, it was a shorter trip and it was his reappearance, but it's not always the same Galopin Des Champs we see. And if there are any chinks in his armour, I'm hopeful Corach Rambler can use that Cheltenham Hill to his advantage and take advantage of those chinks. So hopefully a 25-1 Corach Rambler is a play in the race for me. And I hope I've made a decent enough case, not just saying he's a better horse in the spring.
We can't let you get away with this entirely, Bully. You knew there had to be some blowback for this. My one question to you is, do you think he'll go off shorter than 25-1 come the day?
Yeah, I think he will do, actually. Yeah, I think come the day, people will get, not only is the Grand National factor going to be in play a bit, I think, for people who don't know so much about racing, but you've also got the fact that he's won the last 2 Ultima Handicap chases, and if he's 25-1, I think there'll be shrewdies like myself who aren't going to have him at that price. So I think he'll be a little bit short. I reckon he's 20-1, 16-1 shot come the day.
The reason I ask is because normally, like when I think I go through these and try and find bets, I look at those at the top who aren't going to run, and I look at this one and I see runner, runs, definitely runs, probably runs, definitely runs. Like everything I think at the head of the market runs. It's like I don't think anything comes out barring an issue. So that would be where I'd look for a shortener, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, completely understandable. I think he might shorten a couple of points. It might not be much.
But
if he does, a short as a shortener. Put it that way. I wouldn't be so surprised come nearer the time. He's one of those plunge horses, one of those horses that gets a bit of a late following, because they do happen, and I can see the vibes about him being strong before the race from the camp. And we've seen Lucinda Russell. She can be pretty boisterous about her horse's chances. She's talked up a Hoy Senior in the past on how many occasions, and I can see it happening with Corach Rambler. If that does happen, I think he'll shorten a bit. He won't shorten much, as you alluded to. The market is the market, and it's probably not going to change that much. But all it needs is for something in the 1 or 2 horses in the Irish Gold Cup to really underperform, which is possible, and you'd be looking at a couple of those at bigger prices shortening. So, we'll see. I think it is possible anyway, to answer your question.
Okay, we'll see. I think you're wrong, but we'll see.
We'll see. There's no the great thing about racing is that there is no formulaic science to it. So anything can happen, as they say. Jake,
So
what
now
do you make
the
of my?
the reasoning's now gone to anything can happen.
Jake, I've been absolutely poleaxed there by Dan, haven't I? Really?
I think you could see him get like a Noble Yates type ride where he's just absolutely flying home and beats beating horses. But I really do struggle to see him having the class, the ability, and yeah, just the tactical speed to go and win a Gold Cup. That would be my only issue. But you know, when you get in the extra places on the day, I don't see why you couldn't have an each way bet on him to hit the frame.
Long press A wins anyway. We all know this.
Bring him back. Bring him back. All right, good stuff, guys. That was a lot of fun until the very end. So thank you very much for that. And yeah, that's the second Ante-Post bet show in the series, and the third one will be following on very shortly. Do remember to like and subscribe to us, readers, help us out, and comment with your best Ante-Post bet as it stands. Thanks very much to all those who got in touch with us this week. It is much appreciated. And Jake, Dan, and myself will all see you again next time.